The next and last group is stuck in the 60s. They are easy to spot, middle-aged fellows, now more than middle-aged, with iron-draped ponytails and blue jeans, and ladies with flowing hairs and Indian print garments. They usually wear sandals, often Birkenstocks, no matter what the weather, and the scent of patchouli seems to follow them around. Chapter 2 discusses these pops of people such as The Farm, a commune near Nashville, and the Rainbow Family of Life, a loosely affiliated group of hippies around the U.S. and elsewhere who gather at various points to commune. Holdouts such as Haight Ashbury and Yellow Springs, Ohio are included as well. One might also encounter a person stuck in the 1960s who wasn't even born then, but became enamored of this way of life. And now I'd like to do one more. Do we have time for one short? Okay. Last thing, and then we can do questions. I do need to walk. Okay. This is also, as sad as September 11 was. This is why I was kind of glad that I turned in my books so late. Where have all the flower children books so late? This was this section was a life changer for me. This section of the book is called One Flower Child's Destiny. Myra Joy Aronson is a product of a new world order. Born on December 9, 1950 to Dr. Abraham and Evelyn Aronson, she had a nomadic childhood. She spent her early years in Elgin, Illinois, went to grade school in Madison, Wisconsin, high school in St. Louis, and college at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, where like many of the friends and peers discussed in this chapter. She became politically and socially aware, although Miami was hardly the most volatile of U.S. or even Ohio campuses, because I know Ohio State had quite a bit of uproar too. Although only about 5'1" and a size 2, Myra had presence and definite opinions. A photograph from the April 15, 1970 Miami student shows her being dragged out of the campus ROTC building by 2 Ohio State troopers for resisting arrest during a takeover by student protesters. Rather than being a smirk, her half smile is tacit acknowledgement that she's bigger than the huge guys who are hold of each arm, and perhaps also the flash of the camera meant that she was going to be on the front page the next day. She was. The following year, her junior year, was spent abroad in France, further refining her love of all things Francophile, from wine to clothes to the language, which influenced her taste throughout her adult life. In 1973, after completing some graduate coursework, Myra and her college boyfriend, Matthew Kiernan, who was involved in theater, decided to move to the larger stage that was Boston. It was an exciting time, recalls Steve Addison, now an anchor for the CBS Fox affiliate in Providence, Rhode Island. We worked together as a startup, the Boston Shakespeare Company. A group of about a dozen people quickly became close-knit, although everyone was living on something like $75 a week. But Myra and Matt seemed so much more sophisticated and mature than the rest of us. They always had wonderful parties and stimulating conversations when they were around. We were very concerned with the greater good, adds John Tavacchia, a Boston lawyer, who was involved with the Boston Food Co-op with Matt and Myra during that time as well. Our goal was to educate the community about the aspects of healthy eating and nutrition, but it also provided an excuse for some great cooking. It was through this group and our contacts with Tavacchia that Myra began to do the public relations work that would eventually lead to several full-time jobs and a career in consulting. By the time Myra reached her 50th birthday, she had a life that many would have envied. So she decided to throw herself a party. Although she and Matt had broken up several years earlier, they kept in touch, and she was optimistic about the possibility of finding someone, says her sister-in-law Nancy Aronson of Bethesda. Her sister got married at age 50. Myra traveled regularly to New York, Cape Cod, and the Berkshires, as well as London, Paris, and Ireland. Recently hired by Copyware, a software company in Cambridge, she felt she had finally arrived, remarked Pamela Lee, a pharmaceutical consultant who also lives in Cambridge, Massachusetts. She was decorating her condo the way she wanted, and we spent hours poring over catalogs and picking out light fixtures. If friends were currency, then one might describe Myra Aronson as wealthy. At her party, people came from everywhere, states her sister-in-law Nancy. She had gay friends, married couples, kids. They were all ages, races, and creeds. There was even a conservative guy who was doing heavy-duty public relations for George W. Bush. So if Myra wanted to buy something cute on Newberry Street, she called her shopping buddy Cheryl Albert to visit her favorite she haunts like Bazarians and Ricardis. With the figure of a young girl, Myra had plenty to choose from on the sale rack. She loved to bargain, observed Pamela's. Workouts were with another close friend, professional harpist Felice Pomerantz, at the Metropolitan Health Club in Boston. But Myra was also generous with her time, volunteering at the Handel and Hayden Society, teaching at Emerson College, and helping friends and colleagues with their resumes and public relations efforts. Myra and Pamela often visited the Temple Bar in Cambridge called Headquarters by a group of regulars. We went there at least once a week, continued Pamela. She adored a good martini. Her weight-conscious friends shook their heads in amusement at her qualification of the olives in her stoli as a vegetable. It was in fact at the Temple Bar that Myra wrote her flight schedule on a cocktail napkin for Pamela, wanting to keep a friend apprised of her whereabouts. We always called each other airports, said Pamela. One time we found out we were in Detroit at the same time, and Myra arranged it so we got seated together. Guess where I am, Myra half joked to Pamela as she sat on the plane. She was to arrive in Palm Springs a day early so she could relax and enjoy the pool. They chatted for a few minutes about how unusual it was that it was almost empty, Tuesday generally being a heavy business travel day, and the flight attendant asked her to turn off her phone as the cabin doors were being closed. We'll talk later, Myra said. At the memorial service at the Harvard Faculty Club, about a month after American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into World Trade Center, Myra's sister, Elise Aronson Van Bremen, wondered what Myra would have said to the terrorists on her plane. I bet she would love to tell us about her very last adventure. But they don't really want to think about the final minutes. They don't want to dwell on the fact that incredibly remains were found at the site, and how Nancy went into Myra's home to collect hair samples and a toothbrush. Her brother Jules stayed away for fear of inadvertently mixing his DNA with Myra's. They may not want to know that a friend of Matt Kiernan's, who sometimes experiences such things, had a premonition that Myra Aronson would die inside an airplane, and even had a sense of what might have actually transpired. No one, no matter how charming or intelligent, or even in Pamela's word, with as strong of a sense of her own worth as Myra, could do anything to change the course of events. One can only pray that what happened did so quickly and with the minimum of pain. What is left are memories and mementos. Police still wear some of Myra's clothes. The rest were given away to a charity for Hispanic women, many of whom are small-boned. Pamela keeps the cocktail napkin with the faithful flight schedule in a place of honor in her home. Upon learning of Myra's death, Steve Addison's wife put of the water pitcher that Matt and Myra gave them as a wedding gift on the counter. She placed a sunflower in it, which so symbolized Myra, he says. Pamela refuses to go to ground zero. What good would it do? Myra will be with me always. I don't need to visit the place where she died. A day doesn't go by that Myra's family isn't reminded in 1,000 ways of her passing, just like all the other families of those killed on that day. Some are willing to share their memories, but most find such an exchange too painful. When Matt, who lived in New York at that time, was out west on September 11, wants to talk to Myra, he goes for a walk in the park. I feel her spirit is there. Thank you. Thank you. Now, you guys talk. Ask questions, because I'm talked out. Any questions or comments or? Yes.
When did you attend OSU?
I went in the late, it was probably in 1975, 76. I did not graduate. I just took some graduate courses there in public administration.
So by that time, I understand that during that time here at OSU, there was some big student uprising.
Yeah, there were. Oddly enough, it was like the war in Vietnam was like winding down a little bit. I mean, by the time 1970, when the students were killed at Kent State, really any other protest, it just took the teeth out of it, you know. But there was still protesting going on. In fact, I remember when I was leaving a class, and this is where they used to have the old where the student center was. It was a big plate glass window. Somebody threw a rock and broke the glass window, and they weren't rioting, but they were just acting crazy, you know. And actually, Ohio State, you know, when I did my study of the different campuses, And when I wrote an article about Ohio State years ago for the Alumni magazine. Ohio State actually had among the most intense protests, more so than Kent State, and definitely more so than Miami. I mean, they closed the roads, and they were like throwing tear gas. I mean, it was a miracle that nobody was killed. It was a miracle, and I could have read that saga. Now that I look back on it, I kind of wish I read that section about Ohio State on Kent State. Actually, I don't write too much about Ohio State in my book. I just mention it. But,
Yeah, I know the Oval used to be, all the pavements on the Oval used to be brick.
Yes.
And it was because students were pulling out those bricks and throwing them.
Oh, really? I never heard that.
And because they were afraid someone was going to get hurt by that, they blacktopped all of them.
Oh, that is interesting. I didn't know that.
It was just a few years ago that they took out they undid the center, walkway and put in the bricks.
Wow.
And I don't know, not many people realize it, but the Oval was originally designed by the same man, and I can't remember his name, who designed Central Park in New York.
Right. I know who you mean. I know his name too, and
I know it, but I remember it tonight.
Very famous guy.
Something.
Isn't that why there's a tunnel going from University Hall?
There are tunnels all over underneath OSU.
Really?
I heard that they built tunnels so that teachers, professors could run away from students if they were protesting.
I've never heard that story.
Tunnels are used for maintenance purposes. They have wiring and pipes.
Oh yeah, but there's no water.
Do students use the tunnels? I've never heard.
Students don't usually use them. There are some sections in the medical areas.
Well, yeah, the medical center I know has tunnels, yeah.
But at most places, there are a lot of tunnels. At most places,
Wow.
they're not used much by students at most of the time.
But the tunnel that goes between University Village and then it goes for University Hall right there, over across the street. It's
There are some that use a little bit. A lot of them now, apparently the water table is rising around here, and they're getting a lot of water leakage problems with it.
Right.
A lot of water bugs that are getting into the
Nice.
and they're fighting back with physical facilities.
Yeah.
So they're different issues.
Yeah, I mean, it would all, I could see where that might be kind of dangerous.
But most of the tunnels are not open to public use. But they weren't constructed, they were there for pipes and for maintenance purposes, and they've been around for many, many years. But the uprising, the issues that I remember from the 70s here at OSU was basically, all I remember is the issue with the Oval.
Really?
And that was kind of a big deal, that blacktopping over it at the time.
Yeah,
For security purposes.
Right.
To prevent anyone from getting hurt.
I mean, I can imagine, college students today and people. This must seem like totally alien. When I read it, I think, that actually happened, but it seems so far away to me. The student protests, and the world is so different now, and it's pretty amazing when you revisit that and how different it really was back then. They didn't have I think that there's a huge difference, the technology, and I think the war in Vietnam made a huge impact even on, I talked to people who worked in both Vietnam and Iraq military people, because I have a fairly large connection with military because my son was in the service, and I just know, I've seen it from all sides. And I think that even with the stuff that goes on in the Middle East now, they're much better educated about how to deal with soldiers and how to deal with some of the problems and issues that soldiers face. And in Vietnam, it was so different, and there was such a disconnect between the people that organized the war and the soldiers and the students, and there was no communication at all between any of these people. And I went down for my Flower Children book. I actually went to the LBJ library in Austin, Texas. And I remember, looking through papers, and there was all these older white men, and, now they're close to my age, unfortunately. But, I'm like, oh, the old white men are sitting around, and they were talking about those hippies, It's really interesting to see how different the world is now than it was in the 60s. Because there was just you really, I know, being a young person at that time, feeling very, very torn. And some of this conflict exists today, I understand, between the values of your parents and the values of your peers, and you were either one or the other, but you couldn't be both. There seemed to be, at least from my point of view, no middle ground, which is really why I wrote The Pipe Dreamers. I mean, I wrote The Pipe Dreamers because I had to. I had no choice. It was something that I had to recreate, and I'm glad I did, even though it took me years and years, and I went through a lot of trouble to get it published, and I'm glad I did because it's there. And actually, they use it as a textbook. One of the professors uses a textbook down at Miami. It's not required reading, but it's optional reading. And the Flower Children book I wrote because I felt that I hadn't covered everything. I wanted to cover some of the aspects of the 60s, the people that were living on communes today, some of the conservatives. I was really lucky to be able to go to Washington before 9/11 because I had access to a lot of conservatives that I would have never had access to. So it's been quite an interesting research, quite an interesting long, strange trip, so to speak. Any other questions about the 60s? Well, I have my books back there for sale. The novel is $10, and the other book with the novel it would be $20. So if you're interested, if not, that's okay. If you want to look at them, just check them out or ask me questions. Thank you for your time.